don't sit here and write Russian point papers, and maybe there's someone there that's thinking differently, and God bless them. That's what they're allowed to do. But just from a purely military driven standpoint, it's not what I would be doing if I want to knock out the Baltic states. It's a waste of resources. There are sufficient. Resources in Kaliningrad. They don't need to be reinforced from the land out of Belarus. It's a diversion of forces. It's unnecessary. It's better to take your forces and then take them where they'll have the greatest impact. And that would be closing with destroying NATO forces in the Baltics, and then eliminating the political decision makers that prompted this to begin with. The people who were talking about Kaliningrad blockade, people who are talking about turning the Baltic Sea into a NATO lake, things of that nature. Those are threats, existential threats to Russia's security, and Russia has every right to prepare to respond accordingly. And I think Russia has plans in place to remove the Baltic nations as a threat to Russia if that ever came to division-sized military formation, heavily equipped with tanks, armored fighting vehicles, artillery, helicopters,
and I want to apologize if this lady is watching. What I will do for you, because I didn't ask the Duran your question, I will ask Scott your question, and if I have another conversation maybe with the Duran, I will ask the Duran again the same question. But I feel better we didn't talk about it. It's a good question for Scott too. Fiona's question was, what will be the effect of Russia's victory on NATO and European Union? And then I continue with decision. What to expect from the partner group?
NATO has backed itself into a corner. A rhetorical corner and a policy corner. And they've said that they can't accept the Russian victory. They're going to have to deal with it because Russia's winning. They're also committed now. They've doubled down on stupid, as I like to say, about creating the mechanism of confrontation with Russia. This is clear right now. What should have emerged from the Vilnius summit was the reality that NATO is a paper tiger. That NATO has zero genuine combat capacity. That NATO is incapable, as terms oriented, to wage large-scale ground combat in Europe. They look good on paper, so this is the gem of military formation. Heavily equipped with Stoltenberg talked about creating a 300,000 strong rapid response aircraft. They already have 40,000 strong rapid response. They can't respond rapidly anyway. It has an exercise to full capacity. It's paper only. Tanks, armored vehicles, artillery, helicopters, fixed-wing aircraft. It has zero combat power. I mean, provided to the Russian Ministry of Defense. The air component of that is the we're not going to sit there and let them fight all of us. If we go to war, they're going to be part of the trade. It's a joke organization. Now they're talking about making it 300,000 stronger. Who's going to pay for it? Where are they going to get troops? Here's the other thing. How are they going to train? How do you train 300,000 men all over NATO? Where do you bring them together? It's expensive. The Marine Corps didn't need to be, and I know I'm glad I turned out these comments because I always get people mad when I say this. We're the world's premier combat force. Nobody can beat us. Never will. And one of the reasons why we're that way is A, we believe in ourselves. Believing in combat, believing in yourself goes a long way. Doubt gets you killed. Aggressiveness, when you're paired up with other aggressive people, you tend to win, especially when you're highly trained, which means you're spending all your time when you're not out. Wagner has thinking about it, training for it. They are getting those muscles work the right way. And we train all the time. And you train for the wars you're going to fight. All the Marine Corps did is train small unit tactics. And they were called upon to form a multi-division sized operation. We wouldn't do so well. And it's because we'd be stumbling around going, how do we coordinate regimental operations? How do we link together? What's the command? So we collapse. You have to train. How is NATO going to train to use 300,000 troops? They're not. Well, understand they don't know how to do it. They're not going to do it. It's too expensive. So this is a force that exists on paper only, and nobody can afford it. I'd be surprised if NATO generated half that forces for this. So, but that's the problem is NATO's positioned itself for a confrontation that it can't afford to get into. And whatever they do, it's going to come too late, because Russia's going to win the Ukraine conflict sooner rather than later. It's not going to be a forever war. Etc. Provided. A lot of resources, a lot of industry.
Now the good news is that
state-wide the Soviet Union. Stage 5, the Soviet Union. There are winds of political change taking place in Europe, and governments are starting to fall. Governments are at risk, even ones that might not fall. France, I don't think Macron's out the door yet. Macron is the guy who is starting to say the right thing, like New European Street Trade. That's actually where Russia put their draft treaty back in 2001. New European Street Trade. That's what you target your people in NATO, but need for New European Street Trade. One that recognizes Russia's Soviet national security was a Soviet power. Everybody works. Something was so can't be more today. One of the Soviet economies, one of the likely things that's going to happen is that the Russian victory will cause NATO to regroup and rethink where it's going. Now, this is going to be an interesting discussion because the Poles and the Balts are all about leaning forward. They want those 300,000 troops. They want to build aggressive defense spending. They want NATO to commit to a forward defense of Europe. A lot of resources, a lot of industry. Ukraine was developed as an industrial state by the Soviet Union.
But the rest of NATO may not want
they decided, no, what we need to do is de-escalate. So the most likely consequence of the Russian victory is the initiation of a broad dialogue within the framework of NATO. Russia about what its future is, where they want to go. You have economies that are failing. Germany's heading down the drain. United Kingdom down the drain. Italy is struggling.
France is struggling. The last thing they need to do is get involved in a
military restructuring of Europe that has them investing
hundreds of billions of euros
that they don't have. So I think what we're looking at is
the beginning of a dialogue. It'll be a difficult dialogue because of Europe that has them. Of Europe that has them invest. The last thing they need to do is the last thing they need is kingdom down the drain. Kingdom. Kingdom. Kingdom down the drain. Italy is France. The last thing they need to do is manifest destiny of the Russian victory is the initiation of a broad dialogue within the framework of NATO and the framework of the European Union about what its future is, where they want to go. You have economies that are failing. Germany's heading down the drain. United Kingdom down the drain. Italy is struggling. France is struggling. Germany's heading down the drain. United Kingdom down the drain. Italy is struggling. Germany's heading down the drain. United Kingdom down the drain. Italy is struggling. Kingdom down the drain. Italy is struggling. Kingdom down the drain. Italy is Kingdom down the drain. Kingdom down the drain. Italy is struggling. Kingdom down the drain. Italy is struggling. France is struggling. Kingdom down the drain. Italy is struggling. France is struggling. The last thing they need to do is get involved in a military restructuring of Europe that hundreds of billions of euros that they don't have. So I think what we're looking at is the beginning of a dialogue. It'll be a difficult dialogue because it will not be unity. I also think it's basically planting seeds at the end of NATO. Because NATO is a consensus-driven organization, and when you start to have several cliques inside this gang, as you called it, this sub-gangs, and they're going to say, well, that's not in our interest. We don't want to be part of it. The seeds at the end of NATO, because NATO is a consensus-driven organization, and when you start to have cliques inside this organization, and when you start to have organization, and when you start to have organization, and when you start to have several cliques inside cliques, as you called it, etc. I think you're going to start to see fracturing of NATO politically, and that will lead to the eventual demise of NATO. I think this is the likely outcome. It'll take